Morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, December 4th, 2018. Happy holidays, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Decker, Bonner, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay, we'll start with item number 1 is the consent agenda items. We have, if there aren't any commissioner questions on any of the items, we'll go to public comment on any of the items. Okay, so let's go on item number 1A. I think we have 2.
We have 2 cards. We have Mr. Herman and Mr. Novick.
Sorry.
Oh.
There you go.
It's on.
Sorry.
No problem. Well, we've heard about how donations can become an issue of money laundering. And I, as the chairman of the Brown Act, as the litigator in the interests of public, what is good and what will only be good for the public interest is that these particular donations, and whether or not the donation founders or the donation persons involved with the donations, are they part of a Jose Huizar investigation? I say that because, interesting enough, on Sunday's LA Times, that front page article about Jose Huizar and his wife contributing to the donation issue here, I believe the city needs to put a hold on these donations until we clear up.
Mr. President, the speaker is not addressing the donation before you,
until we clear
So
up
warned there.
the density shelving, Mr. T. Fank. I don't work at your speed, Mr. T. Fank. So for fucking $53,000, Mr. T. Fank, from the fucking police foundation,
Speaker's
Mr.
being
P.
repetitive
Fank,
and not addressing the item.
we
Mr.
need a
President.
homicide
Okay, Mr. Herman,
library.
that's it on this one. Next
Internet
up is
and
Mr.
computers.
Novick. Mr. Herman,
I
your
got
time's
21 seconds, Mr.
over. No, your
Silver.
time's over.
That's discrimination. That's retaliation.
Mr. Herman, please take a seat.
You're not going to let me finish up my time
No, you finished your time. Thanks.
on the next time?
Mr. Novick.
Yeah, so this is a $53,000 donation. It's the largest chunk of donations, but you have about $64,000 in donations again this week. And I've asked repeatedly, I'd like to see somebody on the police commission tally up how much money is being donated week after week to the police department on top of their enormous budget, and urge you to reject these donations and tell the donors to donate that very, very large amount of money to better purposes such as jobs, housing, health care for people in the city to prevent them from getting ensnared with law enforcement. So I think that you're derelict in your duty. You just rubber stamp these as a consent agenda item without debate ever, without any discussion or any analysis of how much money is coming in on top of the budget, and I think it's irresponsible of you.
Thank you, sir.
We have no other comments on this item.
We have a motion for approval of consent agenda item 1A. Second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Mr. President, if I may, in response to Mr. Novak's comment, 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Bonner asked that there be a report prepared on the amount of donations. That report is in the process of being complied.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll have it for next week. If not next week, the following week at the latest. It'll be a report of all of 2017 and year-to-date for 2018.
Basically adding up what's been on the agenda, correct?
I'm sorry, sir?
It's basically adding up what's been on the
Yes,
agenda.
but it's quite voluminous to get the information and to segregate it out so that we can break out donors rather than
Good.
just have an aggregate
Yeah, that's the
number.
way to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, item 1B, we have one speaker.
Mr. Herman.
This is about 700 clip personal safety lights for pedestrians.
What a blessing. Lights that save people here in the largest city in the west side of the state. Although we become the hit and run capital of the state due to poor lighting. And the suggestion here is that we contribute a donation dollar amount for 700 safety lights for pedestrians. Well, I'm a pedestrian. Why can't I receive my so-called safety light now while I'm here? Since I commute through public transportation. Also, I use my 2 legs to walk here. That's called pedestrian walking, Mr. T. Fank. So, like not myself, but like Mr. T. Fank, who claims that pedestrians in the community will benefit, well, I believe he's right. The same way Mr. T. Fank supports the spearmint rhinos with
Mr.
their
President,
lighting.
the speaker's
Off topic. Come on, get with the program here. Let's go. Last warning.
Warning now. Now I'm being warned about monetary donations. I'm being warned because this is a part of the retaliation of this commission and other elected officials in the city to suppress
So that's it.
free speech.
Speaking to the item
Fuck
before
you,
you.
Steve.
Off topic.
We have no other cards on this item.
For approval of 1B. Have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. Herman, we're happy to provide you with a vest and with a light. If you would just see the sergeant in the back, and we'll make sure you get one of those. Okay? Thank you. But you'll need to follow up on that. We're not going to, we need to walk back there to do that.
Yeah, you can do it now if you want. Item 1, do we have any speakers on 1C, D, or E?
No, sir.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of C, D, and E. Second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. On F, we have 1 speaker.
We have Mr. Herman.
This is, okay. Do we have a motion for approval of 1F? Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, let's go to the regular agenda items. On items, let's just do them one at a time. On 1A, do we have any commissioner comments on 1A? This is on the garage and towing storage
2A,
rates.
sir.
I'm sorry, 2A, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have 1 public comment on 2A.
We have Mr. Herman.
Two A, police garage towing and storage rates.
All-timer's a bitch, isn't it? All-timer's a bitch. See, there's no real purpose for having an official garage towing and storage because it discriminates against wetbacks and minorities who are here illegally trying to make a living. You take away their hustle, they can't work. You take away their hustle, they can't provide for their
President, he's
About
children.
not
the
speaking
rates.
to the
This is
item.
about the rates,
I understand
the
that.
rates.
Let me get to that point.
the rates. Okay.
So, as you see on this agenda, folks, there are no rates posted. We don't know if it's determined at $300 a day to $1,000 a day. And most people here illegally cannot afford this type of treatment of monies and rates that discriminate based on your citizenship.
Mr. President, he's not speaking to the item
Your
before
step.
you today.
I'm talking about towing
Let's-
rates,
we'll go to the
Mr. T.
next one. You
Fang.
had your warning. Let's go to, you're going to be up on B anyway, so just hang on.
We have no other public comment cards on this item, sir.
Okay, do we have a motion for
General
approval
public
of
comment
2A?
said I'd go to what was it?
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any commissioner comments on the inventory audit?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
If I could ask the team.
sure.
Mr. President, while the department's coming up on this, the department has requested item 2D, as in David, be continued to next week
Okay,
for just staffing purposes, so that item will be on the agenda for next week.
okay.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you again for this audit. I find this the beginning of auditing devices held by the department as very important, particularly as the chief's agenda is to help this department become more technologically savvy and potentially then get more devices. A few comments, questions specifically with respect to the audit. Can one of you just explain how is it that 66 out of 20,000 is a appropriate sample size?
Certainly. Good morning, Commissioner. Jeffrey Phillips, Commanding Officer of Audit Division. I recognize that seems counterintuitive, but that is, as you can see in footnote number 3, we spell out that was utilizing a 95% confidence level, 5% error rate with a one-tail test. That one-tail test is very key from a statistical standpoint. The reason we use a one-tail test is because what we're testing is very straightforward. It's a yes or no answer. Is it compliant? Yes or no. And that allows us to use the one-tail test. If you were to read any academic research, most of I'm going to say by and large, they use a two-tail test. If we were to utilize a two-tail test, then that sample size would be much larger. But with a two-tail test, they're trying to really dig much deeper into looking at correlation between dependent and independent variables, looking at causation and things of that nature. Here, we're looking at something very straightforward, very binary, yes or no type of thing. And so what happens from a statistical standpoint, the sample size is much smaller because at some point, the probability theory just levels out.
You can tell if the department is passing or not passing that particular
Exactly.
standard. Okay.
Yes. And therefore,
makes sense.
it is representative of the population.
I understand, and particularly for the first audit of this kind for the department, that seems particularly valid sample then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And as a general rule, we're using that same sample methodology with all of our audits, with the exception of, and you'll have the crime classification coming up soon. We use something a little different there, but by and large, we use the same sampling methodology.
Okay, that makes sense. With respect to the categories that were used to, the objectives used to evaluate the department, where do those objectives come from? Because it seemed a little odd to see that objectives were being used where the department, for example, in passing equipment on, the department doesn't do it because there's sensitive materials on the equipment. So it seemed a little odd that there was an audit being conducted on that criteria or that objective.
Certainly. The criteria that is utilized is the project manager will conduct research as to what policy procedure is out there pertaining to the topic area. And as they conduct that research within policy and procedure, sometimes it's the department manual. Mm-hmm. Other times it may be a manual that is specific to that particular division. Sometimes we may, and in this audit, we actually also looked at some of the policy that is put out by the controller's office. And so the project manager will look at various policy and procedures that are out there in developing the objectives. There's some brainstorming that goes around as to what is it that we want to zone in, because it could be endless. So we ultimately make decisions as to where it is that we want to hone in on with the audit.
And I think this question is likely for you, Commander. This is the first audit, and it seems incredibly important that the department continue to inventory its devices and ensure that if it's lost and stolen, it's reported as such, particularly since we anticipate more devices in the future.
Yes.
What steps are you taking to ensure that this is either a regular audit or that the department creates the culture of auditing their own divisions and offices to ensure that they're keeping track of all the technology?
Blake Jail, Commanding Officer, Information Technology Group. What we've done, we recognize the need, as you say, Commissioner. We've got to do a full inventory of all the equipment that we have out there, and we're starting that in January of this year. And what that's going to involve is we're going to be starting in probably a central bureau. We're going to be going out there with our team. We're working with Audit Division. We met with them yesterday to kind of make sure we come up with a good plan that's going to kind of roll out the rest of the year. We're going to first go out there with everything's barcoded and scanned. So we'll go out there with the scanners and we'll scan everything at the divisions and reconcile that with what we have in our system. Part of the program that's going to really help us out is we're kind of reestablishing an IT coordinator position at each one of the divisions. That'll be maybe 2 or 3 people that are already working at the divisions, like training coordinators, that will have kind of really restricted access rights to reset passwords and things. But we're going to make them part of this, where they're going to be able to kind of help us out with the inventory. So we'll roll out OCB, and then my hope is by maybe Q4, we'll have done the whole department. We'll have a picture as to what we actually have out there, and we'll kind of start clean. We'll do take any measures we deem necessary to kind of reconcile that, and then in 2020, we'll start working with the Audit Division. We'll do the official audit, but I believe because we have so much equipment, it'll probably become a process that has to roll out throughout the year.
What are the categories of items that we're going to be inventorying?
This audit focused on personal computers, monitors, laptops, tablets.
That would be it.
Okay. There are more pieces of inventory that we have. We have servers, mobile devices, and things like that. So we're going to, although this audit kind of focused on 19,000 pieces, we have probably substantially more that we are going to encompass in this inspection that we're going to start in January.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. We have one speaker on this.
Yes, we have Mr. Novick.
Mr. Novick, this is on
2B.
2B, Technology Bureau Inventory. Thank you.
Yeah, as I looked at the top of that report, the top category said that the department did not meet the standards. I'm wondering if there's some policy that's being set in place for meeting the standards in the future. But I think the larger question is what you're auditing. If you're only auditing the physical equipment, I think that's inadequate. I think you should be auditing the software and the data and the use of the data, because those are the big problems with information technology. I'm wondering if there's any audit of whether software was copied off any of these computers and used for personal benefits. For example, for LA Unified does such an audit to make sure that people are not making unauthorized copies of software on the school computers. And I think that the question of the data that's stored on your servers is, there have obviously been hacks all around the country of many, many things. So I think that if you're only auditing the physical piece of equipment, you're not doing your job. And I think the use of the data by LAPD to develop these profiles on people and so-called predictive policing is the biggest problem, and you're not looking at that at all.
We have no other comments on this item.
Okay, do we have a motion of approval on 2B?
So moved.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, on items, thank you. 2C, 2D.
D's off.
Oh, yeah, on 2C, do we have any, there are no public comments, do we have any commissioner comments on 2C? Let's have a motion for approval of the BEST grant.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, no one's opposed. Well, 2D is being put to the next agenda, subsequent agenda, item number 2E.
Mr. President, with respect to 2E, I'm going to excuse myself from the room to avoid an appearance of conflict because I have taught at UCLA, and I understand they may be a subrecipient of this particular grant. And while I'm not teaching there right now, to avoid the appearance of conflict, I'm going to step out for this matter.
Thank you. TUI is a grant application and award for the 2018 Strategies for Policing Innovation Program. Were there any questions of commissioners? Pretty straightforward. Okay. We had 2 public comments.
We have Audrey George and Mr. Novick.
Good morning.
Hi. My understanding is this is to approve funds to JSS, Justice and Security Strategies, primarily being the beneficiary of those funds. This commission listens to JSS as data-driven predictive policing program feedback and recommendations, even though JSS profits so directly and significantly from those programs. Rather than giving serious consideration to arguments from Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, which has skin in the game only to the extent of working hard to prevent the harm that the predictive policing and laser cause to black and brown and poor communities. Even the most jaded and uncaring of you on the commission have to concede that Stop LAPD Spying Coalition's relentless and righteous goal to end these programs are backed by both facts and moral imperatives that should influence you to reject this funding.
Mr. Novick, please.
Yeah, I would concur with Ms. George. I think that if you're talking about policing innovations, then the kinds of policing innovations you need to look at are ways to disarm the police so they're not so much of a threat to the community, as opposed to ways to identify people that the police should target through predictive policing strategies. I think that an innovative policing would restore the relationship that once existed, for example, in England, where police did not carry lethal weapons and were able to police quite successfully. So I think if you want to talk about policing innovations, you have to look at ways to not just de-escalate each individual incident, but to transform the relationship of the police to the community. Right now, the police function as an occupying army in communities of color and an internal border guard in more privileged areas, and I think that's an improper role. And it creates tremendous stresses, not just in the community, but among the police officers themselves. So I would challenge you to think about policing innovation in a completely different way than you do now. Predictive policing is all about targeting and trying to, you have this Operation Laser, which just the name signifies that somehow you can function with the police like a laser beam and target individuals based on profiling. And I think that's the exactly wrong way to go.
Thank you, sir.
And we have no other comment cards on this item?
Okay, we have a motion for approval. I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so that's 3-0. And then can we ask the commissioner to come back in? Thank you. Items F, G, and H. Are there any commissioner comments on the reward offers or number F?
No.
Okay. I see no public comments on F, G, or H. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have a motion for approval of items 2F, G, and H. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Let's go to report of the chief. Chief, good morning, sir. Happy holidays.
Good morning, Commissioners. Happy holidays. Got a couple different issues on significant events. First, I want to talk about briefly a hate crime that occurred in South Los Angeles on the 28th that has us concerned, and I'm proud of the work that South Bureau and Captain Leland Sands is doing to try to both identify the individual responsible as well as to address community concerns. And in brief, this did receive some media attention. And as you know, hate crimes is on the rise now in Los Angeles County for the 4th year in a row. 508 hate crimes last year in LA County, of which half those were race-based. That's an increase of 9%. And half of those race-based hate crimes involve African-American attacks or crimes. So on the 28th, the night of the 28th or the morning of the 29th, there is a mural in Hyde Park. Its title is Our Mighty Contribution. It's sometimes known as the Hyde Park Black Panther mural. And on that mural, someone, an individual or individuals, painted 4 swastikas on the faces of the 4 individuals that are depicted on that mural. Clearly a hate crime. It's motivated in its motivation. We were notified by members of the community and have initiated our investigation, including a canvass of the area that day and follow-up efforts, as well as trying to capture any video. While we have no video of the location itself, there are citizens and community members that have video systems in the area that we continue to work with to see if this might help us identify the individual or individuals responsible. I'm happy to say that the mural's artist, Mr. Goodlow, came out that very same day and cleaned up the mural, which I think was critical in allowing the community to have some sense of order and not to allow that despicable attack to go unaddressed. This Friday, on the 7th of December, at 6 o'clock at night, we are having a community meeting that's being co-located with or co-hosted by Councilman Harris Dawson at the Kaiser Permanente Baldwin Hills Community Room. And I would certainly welcome any community members to attend. We'll provide the latest information on this incident, as well as seek any info that they might be able to provide to us. I just want to close my remarks relative to this, certainly answer any questions the commissioners might have. But as to this attack, I think it's representative of what we are seeing as a general sentiment, if you will, and that is a sense of an increase in instances of hate, and also instances of hate crimes. And a troubling one that our efforts as a department is twofold. One is to reassure each community that our investigative answer and response will be swift, it'll be comprehensive, and it'll be relentless to identify those individuals who believe that this type of conduct will somehow be tolerated or go undetected or unresponded to by the criminal justice system. I stand alongside my colleagues in the state and federal prosecutors, DA Lacey, Mr. Hanna, who have firmly committed that any such incident such as this is going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And so there will be a consequence for this, and I just ask the public to recognize that as these expressions of ignorance occur, that not to take actions themselves, but other than to call us and invest in your department and allow us to investigate and pursue these criminals with the right resources and to solve these crimes. Secondly, is our outreach efforts will continue to build a sense of confidence and trust that this is not the accepted tenor in any community. This past week, I met with members of the Anti-Defamation League, their leadership, to talk about the aftermath of the attacks outside of the synagogue in Mid-Wilshire District. I also attended the Days of Dialogue hosted by Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas at the Cedar Sinai Community Room and spent the morning there talking with, in a shared responsibility, a round table of stakeholders as it goes to understanding each other, or valuing our differences, and championing those rather than some expression of intolerance. Our outreach has continued with the Los Angeles Sentinel. I met with Mr. Danny Bakewell, and we are formulating a series of information sharing sessions. I'm encouraged by his paper's progressive nature of use of technology, where it's going to extend beyond their Thursday publication onto websites and information sessions, and we're actually contemplating a chief message, if you will, via that channel on either a monthly or quarterly basis. So these are efforts that I want to assure the public, as you look at your chief and you look at the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department, how we're responding to this lack of civility is to ensure that we demonstrate a support of existing laws, and we know that the vast majority of community dismiss these types of acts, and that this does not stand for any majority or group beyond those few that are from corners and have somehow felt that they can come out of the darkness. And our intent is not to allow that to stand, and also use these as opportunities to strengthen our existing relationship and deepen them even more. I'm going to move over to reporting on an officer-involved shooting, which we, on each instance as we meet here, if there's been any prior officer-involved shootings or in custody death, it's an occasion for me to give a brief to the council, to the commission. And this occurred on the 25th of November at approximately 9:20 at night. In this officer-involved shooting, uniformed officers assigned to Metropolitan Division were working a crime suppression detail in the 77th area of South Los Angeles. While in the area of the 100 block of West 85th Street, the officers observed two pedestrians, one of which was holding a handgun. The officers stopped their vehicles and ordered the individual, later identified as Davion George, male black, and ordered him to drop the weapon, and he failed to comply with that direction, and an officer-involved shooting resulted. Mr. George was not struck by the officer's bullet and was taken into custody after a non-categorical use of force occurred, which involved the discharge of a taser. Mr. George was transported to a nearby hospital and treated for his injuries that were created by the taser darts, not by the round that was fired. He was released from the hospital and later booked at the 77th Area Regional Jail for one count of assault with a deadly weapon, 245 of the Penal Code. The second individual, his name, Mr. Earl Maynard, was taken into custody without incident, and he was later found to have discharged a firearm during the incident which the officers were encountered or confronted these two individuals, and he was also booked for 25850 of the Penal Code, which is possession of a loaded firearm. The investigation continues as to that discharge that he's suspected of being involved in. From the scene, a .40 caliber pistol and a .380 caliber pistol were recovered. Force Investigations, of course, responded, as did representatives from the Office of the Inspector General and the District Attorney's Officer-Involved Shooting Rollout Team. And that concludes my remarks on that officer-involved shooting with no hit. As to our crime picture, moving and transitioning to that, we continue to see a reduction. This is the 8th week in a row that we've seen fewer violent crimes this year versus last. That's an encouraging trend, including our shooting violence, which has slowed. As a result of that, homicides today are 235 as of this past Saturday, versus 261 last year. That's 24 fewer homicides. We have a reduction in each of our violent crime categories for a 3.7% overall reduction in violent crime this year versus last. For our property crime, we have reductions in every category with the exception of personal theft. And what I'm going to ask the public for is, I was on, made some conversations on KBC last week on this, is that in the holiday season, it's prevention on thefts is our key ask. Today, many people, as they're getting ready to celebrate, are purchasing online. We saw the largest Black Monday or Black Cyber Monday in our history as a country, and many of those packages are now arriving on doorsteps. And we were asking for our public to exercise more preventive measures of requiring those packages to be dropped off at safe locations, pre-designated storage locations, that they not just be simply dropped on the front doorsteps. As we see many individuals that are aware of this phenomenon, they simply follow a FedEx truck or UPS truck, and simply it's a matter of following them to see them drop off what I would consider the suspect is called loot. And this is all information. And while many times the purchaser may not suffer a loss directly because they can contact the sender, sometimes they do. They can lose family heirlooms and information that family members are sending those packages. But all of us as a community pay the price of those items as they're stolen, as the manufacturers and shippers and so forth pass along those costs. So the short message on crime is it's good. I believe that we'll end this year with a reduction in violent crime and property crime, which speaks to the success of the strategies that the men and women of this department, in concert with the stakeholders of Los Angeles, have engaged in, and will continue as we enter into 2019. But we definitely need the public's help on this last area of prevention. and recognizing that by hardening the target that they can help all of us and certainly enjoy a more festive holiday season. Moving over to an officer-involved shooting, the statistics or the category of that, year to date, we have now had 31 officer-involved shootings, of which 11 were fatal. Last year in 2017, there were a total of 40 officer-involved shootings, of which 15 were fatal. Our 4-year average to date is 37 total officer-involved shootings and just over 17 fatalities. So we are continuing to see an overall reduction in the number of officer-involved shootings, as well as a reduction in the number of fatal officer-involved shootings. And of course, the ideal number is 0. And so we will, while we are happy to see this reduction, these are, and we believe that, we believe though that we need to stay continued in our efforts to ensure the proper training, tactics, and accountability systems are in place for our personnel as they go about and do at times a very difficult job. Lastly, as to crime and traffic statistics, I want to draw focus to, as we see a slight reduction in the number of fatal traffic collisions in the city. We've had 211 fatal traffic collisions this year versus 218 last year. And we have seen a substantial reduction in the number of serious collisions involving serious injury or death for DUI related, that as we enter this holiday season, that we need the public to, again, use preventive measures. The use of taxis, of Ubers, of Lyfts, of other sources of a safe ride home, a designated driver, is critical for not only their own safety, but that of the public. And while I'm encouraged by this more than 32% reduction this year versus last in fatal and serious injury involving DUI, I recognize this is a season in which there'll be many people celebrating, and this is the time to ensure they exercise that added restraint and responsible act on their own part. Finally, moving over to sworn and civilian personnel statistics. On sworn personnel salary, we have 10,015, and our civilian payroll is 2,980. We have 387 total reserve officers and 1,428 cadets, and we do, as a reminder, have a cadet graduation coming up here shortly, and certainly all the commissioners are welcomed, as are members of the general public, to see that celebration. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chief, any questions of the chief, or we'll go to, we have
Yes.
comments on Chief. Go
Chief,
ahead.
Chief, with respect to the hate crime in South LA, you talked about working with the prosecution offices, both the district attorney and the U.S. attorney. I wonder if you can speak to the collaborative efforts broadly with federal and more regional law enforcement, because it's certainly possible that whoever committed this crime has been committing other crimes and
Right.
connecting the dots. And I recognize that there's limited information you can and should give out regarding the specifics of the investigation, but if you could talk more broadly about the collaborative effort that I'm sure is going on to ensure that if there's a pattern of this crime going on by a group of individuals, that they're identified.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. So I'm going to address this in basically 3 areas. We have a daily information sharing system amongst all the region that's led by the FBI, and it talks about local, regional, and nation, and actually global instances that include instances of hate, but certainly instances of terrorism or attacks of safety. That is used as a pointer system, if you will, for us to draw attention to areas. We also have the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, which is has a broad range of federal, state, and local partners that are also connected directly into our department operations centers from all the respective agencies, and act as a clearinghouse for these type of instances, and regularly aggregate and compare and analyze to determine if there's overlap or similarities, whether in method of operation or suspect identity or victim profile as well. Lastly is we participate both with the Joint Regional Task Force, Joint Regional Terrorist Task Force, which is a bit of a misnomer. Many times that is believed to be terrorist-related, and they're all crimes. That's an all-crimes approach. And that task force made up, again, of all the partners that I've referenced earlier that work regularly on investigations, but also supported by the JRIC and individual area commands such as the department, feed it information as to trend and serial nature of crimes and attacks that occur here on the homeland. Lastly, we also reach out with our public community partners. For instance, the ADL. While that meeting last week was a conversation in the aftermath of the Pittsburgh attack and the synagogue assault that occurred a few weeks earlier, we also attend a quarterly meeting made up again of these partners that ADL actually sponsors that goes specifically to instances of hate. They have one of the best investigative teams, both here locally as well as across the country, and identifying anti-Semitic, LGBTQ hate groups, and those that would believe that this method of inclusion or the value of differences is somehow against and should be fought against. So I believe that we have our ear to the ground and that we're very active in sharing information. Of course, we're always appreciate the visibility also that the media brings to this, both in the print as well as on the television, and it's incumbent upon us to work with the media to ensure that the framing of how we describe these events is accurate, but also our response that we share. Too many times, I believe, we operate as a cloak, and it's a secret as to what we're actually doing, and I believe instead that, and I know our men and women appreciate the fact when we can come up and talk publicly about what our efforts are. And of course, we look for, just as we look forward to solving this crime, just as we are pursuing aggressively the attack on those two men outside the synagogue.
Public comments?
We have Mr. Novick and Michael Williams.
So 2 public comments to the chief's report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Novick?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to deal with there. I think that the incident in the Crenshaw district, the spray painting the swastikas, needs to be looked at in a much larger context, which is the gentrification of that neighborhood and the displacement of black people from the city of Los Angeles, which has been going on for years, and can't be looked at as an isolated incident of a few miscreants who are motivated by hate. There's an ongoing problem in the city of displacement of black and brown people and poor people, and particularly in the Crenshaw district. It's very hot now because of the building of the Crenshaw line. I think that you can't look at it in isolation. I'm also very troubled by the allies that the chief laid out. The FBI for years has been hamstrung and prevented from looking at organized white supremacy as a major terrorist threat inside this country, when in fact that's been the major source of killings and bombings repeatedly. And I think that the ADL in particular is an inappropriate partner. The ADL was involved in enabling the LAPD to circumvent the settlements and injunctions against political espionage by the LAPD. The ADL was involved with the LAPD, the San Francisco PD, the Portland PD in getting around court injunctions that prevented them from doing political espionage. The ADL was involved in planting people inside the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee who were also involved with neo-Nazi activities, and it was an attempt to discredit the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. So I think that the ADL is a very inappropriate partner in this work, and I think that you need to rethink, again, the whole question of policing. It's not individual incidents. It's a social, political, and economic problem that you are part of until you deal with it in those terms.
Michael Williams.
Mr. Williams?
This false narrative that you guys keep putting out, that you guys do what the community wants, or you guys are trying to do what's in the best for the community, is so abhorrently divergent from the decisions that this body commission has made, and it's ridiculous. So I just want to run down for the folks who are new to this meeting what this committee has actually approved and what they've actually done. So the first thing is that there was no significant punishment for the officers who shot Ezell Ford. Mind you, this body found that the 2 officers who shot Ezell Ford, who was unarmed, were out of policy. Yet the police chief, who was at the time was not Michael Moore, so I'm not going to hold you accountable for your predecessor's decisions, decided that he was going to denounce the decision and then not hold the officers accountable. Those officers were still on payroll for years after the decision was made, and they did not hold the chief of police accountable to punishing these officers or holding them up to be prosecuted for their crimes. Then they found that they approved the murder of Waukesha Wilson, even though they admitted later that they knew there was 20 minutes missing from the footage of her murder. 20 whole minutes missing from her murder. And they knew about that before they made their decision, and they still decided to approve her case and not continue a further investigation on that missing footage. Then when we talk about Brother Africa, they approved the murder of Brother Africa, even though a civil jury who had the same information, the same evidence as this body, found that the police officers were liable for Brother Africa's murder. Again, Brother Africa was a houseless man who was unarmed when he was shot. This body approved his murder and said that it was in policy. Then when we go to the murder of Eric Rivera, they said that the murder of Eric Rivera was in policy, even though we know that he was unarmed and he was run over by the police patrol cars after he was shot. This is what this commission will do, and I'll give you more after.
Yeah, do you have a public comment card in too? Well, then why don't you go ahead and do that right now? Is that okay with you? Yes. Go ahead.
So the next thing is they found that the murder of Jesse Romero, a 14-year-old, was in policy, even though now we know, and they had the same evidence, and it's now from a civil trial, they had the same evidence. They now know that Jesse Romero was unarmed when he was shot. And they found that in policy. And if you actually, for folks who were there at the trial, who actually saw the video, you can see that the officer aims down his sights, looking at the 14-year-old boy, and then pulls the trigger on him. He also hit his camera. Then you approved a budget. You approved a budget that during a community meeting, that the community, even though the community denounced the budget for multiple reasons, including it diverts funding from houselessness programs, people like organizations like LAPD, Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, LA Can, several departments from UCLA and other universities denounced the use of funds for programs Laser and other predictive policing programs. And you yet still approved this budget, even though the community came out without even a second thought. You guys didn't even think, oh, maybe we should relook at the allocation of this money. You just went ahead and approved it, even though the community came out to your community meeting and said they didn't want this money going to these programs. And you still approved it. You still approved it. And this is just recently. This was just a couple of weeks ago. Then, so this false narrative that you have, that you're putting out, that you guys are for the community talking about these hate crimes, these are hate crimes. What I just listed, these are hate crimes because you guys kill more people than any hate crimes in Los Angeles. You kill more black and brown people than any hate crimes. Those are hate crimes. But you want to say that you are a part of the community and you represent the community. But this is your history. This is what you're a part of. And I just want to remind everybody here, that's what this body does.
We're in public comment now. Other speakers?
6 additional cards.
Okay.
We have Mr. Novick, Mr. Herman, not present. Jacqueline Richardson.
Mr. Novick?
Yeah, I concur with those remarks. I want to raise again the question of where we have these meetings. I'll keep raising it until you change your policy. Maybe you're happy that there's almost nobody here today. But I think it's shameful. I think that you need to meet every week outside of the police administration building, out in the community. I think you need to meet in every part of the community, in the harbor, and in the valley, and in the Crenshaw district, and and everywhere else in the city, Echo Park, Silver Lake, on the east side. And I think your failure to do so demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and a lack of accountability to the community. again, I appreciate the fact that Mr. Bonner apparently has moved to do an inventory of the money that's donated, but it's not just the inventory. I think you need to urge those donors to give the money to better purposes. I think that the police have plenty of money, as was just mentioned, spending it very unwisely, and that there's no need to supplement the budget with those donations week after week. And I think that you should do a similar inventory of the cases that you hear on a weekly basis for discipline. Again, as I've said previously in those incidents, it's not just the individual cases. You have to look at the pattern and practice. You have to evaluate the sum total of how many people. The chief briefly gave some numbers that said that the fatal shootings were down, but the percentage of fatalities is still pretty high. And you have several weeks left in the year where we can anticipate there will be additional shootings, because the last several weeks there have been shootings. So I think that you need to look at it systematically and systemically and deal with the policies. That's your job primarily, is to advise on policies and to look at the pattern and practice of what this department does, and to do it outside of their domination.
Jacqueline Richardson. John Avalos.
Morning.
Good morning. I'd like to make comments on two different subject areas. The first one is cemeteries in the downtown area. There's one cemetery in an office building near Pershing Square Park, near the Red Line entrance. It's about the 14th floor. 14th, and they bury bodies in crates. That's been there about 10 years. There's another cemetery in a park, in a church down the street, right in front of the Board of Supervisors meeting. They hold the bodies in the basement. That's been going on for about 10 years. The second, I don't know if that has any significance or not. The second subject is large families with one man fathering about 1,000 children. After the children, their grandchildren, and they have different mothers, many mothers, and the mothers and these people have grandmothers and different cousins and different aunts and uncles. They're here in the United States in different parts of the county. I know a few of the families, and the ones that I do know are honorable, and they do they have responsible jobs, but I don't know all of them. They're here in Los Angeles, and they have many jobs, and they're most of them, as far as I know, of Russian descent, and most of them. I don't know what the racial makeup of the families are, but the ones I know are black. Not black; they're white. They may have some black people in their families. I don't really know that. So I wanted to cover those two subject areas: burials within the city, then a mile of here in two different places, downtown locations. One is in an office building, the other is in the bottom of the church. The second subject are large families consisting of 1,000 or more children with different mothers, many different mothers, of course, different sets of grandparents and other relatives.
Thank you.
John Avalos, followed by Mateo Nagasi and Terry Akins.
Hi, everybody. John Avalos. I have a BA in sociology from UC Santa Cruz and an MA in dance specialization from Stanford University. But I'm very low income right now. I live in Highland Park. And I really believe that it should not say Board of Police Commissioners. It should just say LA Police Department. Why does it say? Anyway. You have the community thinking that this is a oversight, the community oversight of the police. It's a police department meeting. Admit it. The city attorney de la Tejera, you're there for the police. You're there to But why isn't somebody there next to you for us, an attorney for the community? You're there for the police. One time you yelled at one of these guys came up here, a very dark-skinned black guy said that you work for us, and you got mad, and you stood up, and you said, no, I don't work for you. I can't believe that day. I'll never forget that. There should be somebody next to you, an attorney representing us. You do not represent us, Mr. De La Tejera. Silent Sandra has been missing 2 times in a row. Sandra Figueroa Villa. The mayor has no idea what's going on. She was put in there after they put all the cholos in the prisons. Echo Park is okay now. All the business owners and homeowners, oh, we got the police to take care of our richness. The police are wonderful. They cleared out Echo Park of all the cholos. They're all in jail. Silent Sandra. Shane, you were at a major event I saw on Facebook, and you did not even say on the bio that you're on this commission. Why was that? It was a big social justice event that you were at. Your bio did not say that you're on this commission. What does that say to me?
This one? Where's it? Okay. Mateo Nagasi here. I just want to comment on the whole hate crime, the rise in hate crimes, and the work you claim to be doing it to stop it, to contain it, when you foster it. You give people permission to do what they do because you murder black and brown people, you frame black and brown people, you harass black and brown people. The jails are filled with black and brown people. The prisons are filled with black and brown people. You're not a friend of black and brown people, frankly. So, you say they're racially based. When we were over at the community function, you were up there with Jackie Lacey and the former sheriff who, just got bounced out of his office. You said it was society's problem because society was biased. Well, the overwhelming opinion was that the police force is racially biased. And we all know that to be true. Let's see, what else? Bonner, right? You said you're going to look into the finances. You could start with the DROP program, and you can start with the chief who colluded with the mayor and Herb Wesson and the rest of the city council to circumvent the DROP program and get a windfall payment of $1.27 million for retiring for 30 days. And then because of that retirement, he got a $300,000 a year retirement on top of his $240,000 salary. So you can start there if you want to, trace where all the finances is. And I disagree. The mayor does know where everything.
Thank you, sir.
Terry Akins. And we do have one late card, Mr. President.
It's okay.
Okay. Gina DiPietro.
Ms. Aikens, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, I'm here to finish my tragic story. Anyway, about organized gang stalking and my family. Last incident, LAPD came downtown LA where I work, and they came by, and of course another actor was acting weird. I got my job from Panic at the Disco music group. Okay, my niece writes for them. Anyway, to get back to my story, when I was married, I was made homeless after a period of time through organized gang stalking, which is still going on. As I just told you, I was in a Glendale shelter. Mike Antonovich came in. They arranged my current living situation with Paul Marsick, Aku Beckett, Alan Kelly again, Screen Actors Guild producer, and the stalking continues, okay? They then went to Herb Wesson, and my political problems are still continuing. I'm not laughing, guys. And this next, if you think I'm not doing things politically, then you're wrong. I have to. This is not something I want to do. I hate publicity. I hate public speaking. I hate coming here. I hate it all. But this is self-preservation. And I am damn tired of what my family and my ex-husband and my ex-in-laws have done to me, along with Oprah Winfrey. This has been going on since 1983 in my early 20s. And this, again, has everything to do with the Wassermans, who I love, okay? They've done more for this country than anybody has. However, as I said, I will preserve myself, and this is wrong. I didn't do anything, and I don't deserve it.
Gina DiPietro.
Morning.
Good morning, LAPD Commission. I'm Gina DiPietro, and I'm here to address Chief Michael Moore today because yesterday in the newspaper, the article came out that despite the promise from LAPD Chief Beck and Councilman Buscaino, the Harbor Division Jail is not going to be opened in February as promised, and that's a huge disappointment. It's tragic to me that San Pedro is so full of crime and the Harbor Division is so understaffed, and I truly believe that we need more police officers at LAPD Harbor Division, and I would love that jail to be open because you guys promised, and we spent at least $24 million building it, and it's still not open 10 years later, and it breaks my heart. It really does. I live in San Pedro. It's hard to live in San Pedro right now. But the thing is, the same week, that very same week, there was a meeting at the LAPD Harbor Division Community Center, and you guys want to spend $2 to $3 million opening up a brand new structure, building a structure within the California Coastal Zone, so it falls into the California Coastal Commission's space where they are going to be needing to review your permits, and what you want to build is a structure for storage there, and that's going to need staffing. And I don't understand how you can spend an additional $2 to $3 million on a new structure next door to an empty structure that you can't afford to staff. It's heartbreaking, and it's mind-boggling, and I scratch my head over it day and night. And I just also, at that meeting, at the community meeting where you're discussing the project, I suggested that you coordinate with the Department of Homeland Security because, once again, these are our neighbors at the port. They should be, at minimum, let in on the project so they can inquire as to what kind of items are going to be stored there and how it's going to be staffed. I don't see how you can staff it when you can't afford to staff the jail. It's already there. Thank you so much.
Chief, the reopening of Harbor Jail was part of our budget request. that the commission
Commissioners,
approved?
yes.
Okay. We have no other general public comment cards. We do have one card on closed session item 5A1. We have Mr. Novick.
Oh, this is on item A1.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, 5A1 is a public employee dismissal release evaluation, and I note that it's for a case that actually took place this year. We're looking at a law enforcement-related injury, and it's case number 1 of 2018. So I think that's significant that usually you're well over a year behind. So I think that there were slightly fewer cases, therefore, this year that required you to look at. So, that, I would say that's a good thing. But I would be curious to see whether you have any sum up of your work over the rest of the year in all the 2017 cases that you looked at over the course of 2018. Were any of them found out of policy? And if any of them were found out of policy, were any of those officers actually removed or prosecuted? And I suspect the answer might be no on prosecution, because we know that DA Jackie Lacey has not prosecuted a single officer ever in her tenure for any of the killings that have taken place. So I think that, again, I would urge you, when you look at each individual case, to do it by examining the question of not just the policies, but the pattern and practice, that because that is what's taken into account in the civil lawsuits that are brought, and that's significant evidence to take into account. You claim to do evidence-based policing about people in the community. I think you ought to do it about the department itself. You have evidence of multiple killings every year. You have to draw some conclusions about that as to what policies are necessary to prevent it and what kind of pattern and practice of behavior it illustrates. So when you're looking at the case of a beating of Kay Elkin, I think you should look at it in the context of what else led to that.
There are no other cards.
Okay.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. We have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. This is the
Hi, I'm Gina Ray, and this is my dog Whippet. We're from Winnetka. Get it, girl. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35. This is our city and our channel.